Welcome to your week 10 Nursing 1000 recorded lecture. We're going to be going over communication techniques and tips to help you answer NCLEX style questions to get those communication questions right. Talking a little bit about culture and how that can be incorporated into questioning, as well as highlight and drag and drop NCLEX style questions. So hopefully by this point in your education or your careers that you've had in the past, you've heard about therapeutic communication techniques. If not, you were first introduced to it when you were reading to prepare for today chapter, the communication questions chapter in your textbook. But therapeutic communication techniques, there's different things that we consider when we're having a conversation with someone or when we're trying to communicate with someone. To be therapeutic would indicate that they're good communication techniques that can help build a therapeutic bond with our patient, as well as help us get the information that we need to get from the patient. So, therapeutic communication techniques encourage communication, expression of thoughts and feelings, uses active listening, and has us aware of any nonverbal cues from the patient as well as our own. And we're going to monitor the client's nonverbal cues. So this little visual about being an active listener, we want to make sure we're focusing on what's being said, ignoring distractions, which can be really tough when you have a high patient load or you're really busy at work. We're asking questions, and we need to be asking the right kinds of questions to get the information that we want. We want to tell the speaker if we understand or don't understand. Nod our head, let our patient know that we're listening and engaged in what they're saying. Face the speaker, repeat back what we've heard. Be sure to make eye contact if culturally appropriate. Keep hands and feet still, right? We don't want to be tapping our feet or looking at the clock, indicating we're rushed and we're getting tired of hearing the patient say what they're saying. And we want to wait for the speaker to stop before we take our turn to speak. Some nonverbal forms of communication include maintaining eye contact, practicing good posture, right? You don't want to be slumped in a chair looking like you're about to fall asleep when the patient's telling you all these signs and symptoms that they've been experiencing and you don't look like you're engaged. We want to smile when appropriate, avoid unnecessary movements, keep an open stance, so we don't want to have arms crossed. Things like that. An open stance would be more arms to the side. Avoid crossing the arms, and again, nodding to show interest. Some therapeutic communication techniques that you'll see on NCLEX style questions. So you might be given a scenario in your question, and then you'll have answer options of what are you going to say to the patient. Broad openings are a big one. They encourage the client to select the topics for discussion, so really broad, open-ended questions. Open-ended question means encouraging conversation because these questions require more than one-word answers. So we don't want to ask the patient a one-word answer. Did you take your meds last night? Right? Would be a yes or no. Or it doesn't necessarily even have to be just yes or no. But if it's a one word, if you look at a question and the answer option, you could reply with one word. That would not be the correct answer. Because our goal as nurses in getting the information that we need to get is to get as much information from the patient as possible and then work through it and figure out what we need and what it means. So broad, open-ended questions will give us as much information as possible. Your textbook went over some therapeutic communication techniques listed on this slide. I'm going to go ahead and let you look over that in the textbook yourself, but you want to be familiar with them and recognize them if you see them. Non-therapeutic communication techniques impair or block conversation. They're considered barriers to effective communication. Some things that are considered non-therapeutic, things that we would not want to use. We want to avoid close-ended questions. Questions that can be one word or yes or no answers. 99% of the time, a closed-ended question would not be appropriate. There's always, some exceptions. For instance, if you have a patient who is suicidal, a closed-ended question of do you have a plan to hurt yourself would be an appropriate question for that patient. But 99% of the time, we're not going to use closed-ended. We're going to use open-ended. Another non-therapeutic communication technique would be showing disregard. So we want to avoid that. We do not want to change the subject, right? We're going to let the speaker sort of drive the conversation and guide it as we can. We don't want to disagree, disapprove, provide false reassurance. They'll sort of, it'll be okay. Well, do you know that it will be okay? You don't want to say those things. Minimizing the client's feelings. Oh, that's not a big deal. Because to the client, it may be a big deal. And placing the client's feelings on hold. So we saw here too a lot of client. Communication should always be client or patient centered or focused. So you might have answer options that relate to the patient's family or friends, coworkers, whatever it may be. And those answer options are usually not going to be correct because our answer options, our communication should be patient focused. Avoid asking why. This one can get students a lot until they learn this test taking tip. So why would you feel that way, or why would you be nervous about this procedure? Because when we say why, sometimes it can imply that the patient's feelings really aren't valid. They shouldn't be worried about that procedure or whatever they're going through. If you had a check off and I said to you, why are you worried about Foley? That's an easy one. And you've been up all night stressing about it. It sort of minimizes your feelings. So we don't use why questions. So if you have 4 answer options and one of them starts with why, you can eliminate it off the get-go. It's not going to be the right answer. Your textbook also has another chart about non-therapeutic communication techniques. So I'm going to let you look over those on your own. We're going to talk a little bit about cultural considerations. I like this little picture here. It has different people at an international airport. And the one guy's reaching out his hand. And whoever he's meeting isn't returning the handshake. This gentleman's trying to hand over a card, but this guy isn't taking it. He's waiting for the handshake. She's invading his personal space, and he's wondering why she's in his space. This gentleman isn't sure what he should do next. So things related to cultural communication that can vary among different cultures is the style of communication, whether or not eye contact is appropriate for the culture, and the meeting of touch or personal space. So if an NCLEX question mentions a specific cultural group, what you want to do is start thinking about specific cultural or spiritual characteristics to answer the question correctly. And in your courses, you might talk about specific cultures. Usually for the NCLEX, it'll be more generic. So it's not like you have to know everything that you need to that there is to know about specific cultures. Depending on where you work, you may be exposed to a variety of cultures or a very limited amount of variety in terms of culture. And it'll be your job to become familiar with the cultures that you're going to see in your future employment. For the NCLEX, it'll usually be pretty generic, just trying to recognize if you're recognizing issues related to culture and what you would do for those. Big thing is that we never want to impose our belief on the client, because it's natural human nature to feel like the way I do things is correct, the way my parents are doing it, my friends, we're all in the same culture, we're all doing the same things, but we can't impose that belief onto other people. We need to ask the client what cultural preferences they want included in their plan of care. So we'll use the client as one of our resources to make sure that we're providing culturally competent care. Other cultural considerations include dietary preferences should be included in the plan of care. We want to ensure that the client receives adequate nutritional intake to prevent nutritional deficiencies while considering any cultural dietary preferences, so culture, religion, those types of things. Finally, related to culture, end-of-life practices can be different based on different religious and spiritual beliefs. So we want to ask the client and or family what religious or spiritual beliefs, practices they want to include in the plan of care. We're going to wrap it up with 2 next generation NCLEX item types, so 2 newer questions that were recently added to the NCLEX. First one's the highlighting. So you might be asked to highlight information in a table or text. So for example, with a table, you might get a medical record, nurse's notes, lab values, whatever it may be, and the instructions will ask you to select or highlight words or phrases that answered the question that's being asked. So on the NCLEX, it's on the computer, so you'll highlight it by dragging, your cursor over it. In your nursing school exams, you might be asked to underline or circle something provided in a table. And the same thing can apply to text, where you're highlighting information within text to indicate a problem. That has a plus minus scoring where you get a point if you answer it correctly. You lose a point if you select incorrect information, but you never get less than 0. You wouldn't go into the negative. There's a couple different drag and dropped sort of item types. So the NCLEX again is on the computer. So for this close, it's similar to a fill in the blank with the word bank. So you'd have a question with some blank spots. You'd have words that you'd be able to pull up and plug into those blank spots. You get a point for correct answer, no points for incorrect answers. The rationale are interesting questions. So they include one sentence with either one cause and one effect, or a sentence with one cause and two effects. And basically the point of it is for you to fully understand cause and effect relationship. So they're worth either 1 or 2 points, and you have to get the answer options right. So you'd have to get the cause and the effect correct in order to get the point. Drop down and table includes table information with drop down options. Still, it's very similar to sort of a fill in the blank with a word bank. You get 0 or 1 point, 1 point for correct answers, 0 points for incorrect answers. That wraps up our week 10 recording. I hope you guys have a great week. You will have some practice math that will not have a recording to go with it. So when you go through it, if you're having problems setting up the math or anything like that, I want you to reach out to me personally and we'll get together and work on that because it's just an activity today, not a recording that will walk you through it. So have a great week 10 and reach out if there's anything you need.